everyone, this is Spring, the fiber enthusiast. Welcome to my channel. Today's tutorial is going to be the cowl part of a set. These sets are being made for wings, and all of that information will be found down in the description box below. This cowl is to match the hat that was previously recorded tutorial. I will also link the hat tutorial down in the description box below, and at the end of the video it will pop up as a click on this to go to it. So let's go ahead and go over some items that you will need. You'll need some yarn, of course, and I'm using a 4-weight yarn. I'm using some Caron Simply Soft and some Red Heart Super Saver in the color tan, I think, or beige and ocean. You also want to grab some stitch markers. Just grab yourself a handful of them. I like to grab a different one. This is a fixed circular that I've made, and I use it to distinguish the difference between my repeats and the beginning and end of my row. Now, if you're comfortable without using stitch markers, by all means, go for it. You'll also need some type of needle to sew in the ends at the end, and a pair of scissors to cut, your yarn as you need to. And another thing that you might find useful, this was shown to me by another YouTuber, Katrina's Creations, to use these bread ties for your tail at the beginning of your work, and just by placing your yarn over your tail, if you have a lot of tail left over, place it over the top and kind of work it around like this, and then hook it in, and that takes up the slack. So that's an option if you so choose. So for today's tutorial, you're going to need your favorite yarn, your worsted weight yarn, or if you want to go thinner, that's fine. You'll have to adjust the multiples according to the size of yarn you use. In this, the original pattern that I made, it actually is feels like butter, which is on the lighter side. So that's up to you. If you want to use something a little on the light side of a 4, I will be using Caron Simply Soft in the color Ocean and a Red Heart Super Saver in the color beige or tan, whichever it was. And that's so that way it matches the hat, because September this year, they're asking for matching sets. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to grab my main color first, because this is worked from the bottom up, and then we just tie in a little bit of this at the top to make the two go together. What you're going to need to do with your main color is cast on in multiples of 11. For this tutorial, I will be casting on a total of 100 stitches. And I know that's one extra, and I will show you why once I have cast on 100 stitches. So go ahead, and if you're following along with me using a worsted weight and circulars, DPNs, however you choose, I will be using a set of circulars, and these are a US 9. So I'm going to long tail cast on. You cast on however you wish. If you need help with different styles of cast on, I do have tutorials on how to do so. All right, so I'm going to get busy starting the cast on of 100 stitches, and I will meet back up with you and show you what to do next. Okay, so once you have your 100 stitches cast on, all right, so let's go ahead and get situated here and show you how to remove that one stitch and connect in the round all at the same time. This is my favorite way of connecting in the round, creating a nice join. So you're going to want to make sure that everything is all going the right direction. And then you're going to take, so we have our working yarn on our right hand side. Remember, I am a continental knitter, so my working yarn is on my left hand, but that does not matter for this process. So you're going to slide both ends all the way down to the tip. We're going to place our last stitch onto our left needle. We're going to take our first stitch, that very first cast on stitch, and pull it over the top of that stitch you slipped. Just like that. Okay, so we've decreased that stitch. We just dropped that stitch. Now we want to place the one we slipped back over to our right hand needle. Now we're ready to work in the round. We have decreased by one stitch. So now we're back to 99 stitches. So this very first round that we're going to be doing is our setup round. You're going to need some stitch markers, and I grab a handful of them and just throw them down, pick them up as I need them. Now, I do usually use one that is different from all the rest. So, like this red one, I could use as my very first stitch marker to let me know that that's my stopping point. Red means stop. So that would signify that's the end of the round. But I also have other stitch markers that I like to use to do that. So I have some handmade ones that I made myself, and I use those to tell me that that's the end of the row. So now you're going to knit 11 stitches and place a stitch marker. And you're going to do that all the way around, just knitting 11 stitches and place a stitch marker. That's all there is to round 1, which is just a setup round. So 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Let me double check. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. And I'm going to go ahead and place my first stitch marker. And if you're comfortable with not using stitch markers, that's perfectly okay. I like to use them when I'm working in segments in the round to make sure that I don't get off by accident. And I'll know right away if I've lost a stitch or gained a stitch. So go ahead and continue working all the way around, placing one stitch marker for every 11 knitted stitches. Okay, so once you have your setup row complete, you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 sections between those stitch markers if you're using stitch markers. Irregardless, you should have knitted 99 stitches around. So now we're going to begin with round 1. This is a 4-round repeat. Purl 2 together twice. That was once and twice. Yarn over, knit 1 3 times. 1, yarn over, knit 1, 2, yarn over, knit 1, 3. Okay, yarn over, bring your yarn to the front, and purl 2 together twice. So there's 1 and 2. Okay, I'm going to do that repeat one more time, and then I'm going to let y'all have it for this round. So bring your yarn to the front, purl 2 together twice. So there's 1, 2. Now we're going to yarn over and knit 1 3 times. Yarn over, knit 1 1, yarn over, knit 1 2, yarn over, knit 1 3. Yarn over and purl 2 together twice. So yarn to the front, purl 2 together 1, purl 2 together 2. So round 1 is purl 2 together twice. Yarn to the front, insert your needle from right to left, yarn over, and purl 2 together. That was 1. We're going to do that again. Now yarn over and knit 1 3 times. That was 1, yarn over, knit 1 2, yarn over, knit 1 3. Now yarn over, bring your yarn to the front, and purl 2 together 2 times. 1 and 2. Sliding your stitch markers as you come to them. That is your repeat for round 1. Go ahead and continue working in the round, and I will meet up with you at the end of the round to tell you what to do for rounds 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so we've completed round 1 of our 4-round repeat. Rounds 2, 3, and 4 are as simple as knit every stitch all the way around. You should have 99 stitches at the end of each round. And that is your 4-round repeat. You have your pattern round that we just did, and then you have 3 rounds of knitting every stitch all the way around. So go ahead and continue on with the pattern, just repeating rounds 1, 2, 3, and 4 until you have reached round 41. At round 41, you should be ending with a design round. And how you can tell that you're on track is you can count these ripples here from where we purled 2 together, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 is our last one at the very top up here. So go ahead and continue working on this, and I will meet up with you when I have reached round 41, and I'll show you how to finish off the very top. Okay, so we have completed our 41 rounds, and again, you can tell as you go, you should have 11 repeats of the 4-row repeat, and you're starting down here. Even though it's not a full repeat, start counting from this very first wave here of those purl 2 togethers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and your last row is the 11th one. So now we're going to do 1 row of knitting, and right off the bat we're going to knit 2 together. So we're going to decrease this whole round by 1 stitch. This is the only decrease on this round that you're going to do. You're going to decrease 1 time and knit every stitch around. So we have decreased from 99 stitches down to 98 stitches. And now as we're knitting in the round, going around, knitting every stitch, you can start removing your stitch markers if you were using them. And once I have reached my end over here, I'm going to cut from color A and start with color B. And we'll begin the seed stitch on color B. Okay, so I've made it all the way around, and now we're going to do the seed stitch, which is the part that I've done up here. And I'm not going to use the 2 different colors. I'm just going to use color B for the entire 4 rows. So that is what we're going to do next. And we're just going to add in color B, knitting that very first stitch with color B. And then what I do, and I do it somewhat loosely so that way I can remove it and sew in the ends later. I just kind of tie a little knot, nothing that's like super secure, just to help keep things stabilized while I continue working in the round. And then when I come back, I'll undo that knot and sew weave in those ends. All right, so for the seed stitch, all you're gonna do is do a 1-by-1 ribbing style. So we knitted the first one, we're gonna purl the second one. And continue with knitting one and purling the next. I will meet back up with you at the very end of this round, and I'll show you how to work round 2. Okay, so I'm coming up to my very last stitch of this seed stitch round, and it should be a purl stitch if you're following along with me. The very last stitch of this round is a purl stitch. Okay, now for round 2, and this is what you will do for the next several rounds. Like I said, I only did 4 rounds, and on the 4th round, I cast off. And I will show you how I cast off, because I cast off in pattern. So our first stitch was a knit on the previous round. So we want to purl that stitch and then knit the next one, purl the next, knit the next. So what you're doing is you're knitting the purls and purling the knits. Now, if you want to see whether or not you have a knit or a purl, we can look at it a little bit closer here. Find something to point with. So right here is a bump, and right there is a V, then a bump, then a V. The bumps are your purl stitches, so purl. The V is your knit stitch. Purl, knit, purl, knit. So you're going to continue in that manner, knitting your purls and purling your knits all the way around. That's a knit, so I'm going to purl it. That's a purl, so I'm going to knit it. And continue until the end, and I will meet up with you at that point. Okay, so we're coming up to the last couple of stitches. You should have a knit stitch as your last stitch for this round. Transfer your stitch marker, and we will begin round 3. Round 3 is exactly the same as we just did. You're doing the opposite of what you see. So the first stitch is a purl stitch, so we're going to knit that stitch. Purl the next. And continue on around until you have reached the end of round 3 of the purl and knit seed stitch. And then I'll show you how to cast off in pattern. Okay, so I'm coming up to the end of round 3 with the seed stitch, and your last stitch should be a purl stitch. And now we're going to cast off, but we're going to cast off in pattern. So I'm going to remove my stitch marker because I don't need it anymore. And continue working the same way that we have. If it's a knit, you purl it, and if it's a purl, you knit it. So my first stitch is a knit. I want to purl that stitch and knit the second stitch and pass the first stitch over the second stitch. The next stitch is a knit stitch, so I want to purl that stitch and pass the first stitch over the second stitch. The next stitch is a purl stitch, so I'm going to knit that stitch and pass the first stitch over the top of the second stitch. And you don't want this to be too tight. We want to make sure that it's loose enough to go over the head. So you just continue working that all the way around to the very end, and then we'll bind off and sew in our ends. Okay, so I am now down to binding off from my last ball of yarn, the color B. So I'm going to go ahead and cut loose from it, and then what I generally do is bring that tail through the loop before I finish the actual last bind off, cast off stitch, and pull that down. And now you have this opening here. We're going to join with our needle and thread to the very first stitch of that round. I locate my first sets of stitches. So there's a knit, there's a purl, and then right above it is another knit stitch. And from the right side going in, I locate that stitch and go through the top of that stitch and pull my tail thread through, and that way I can join, pulling that tail thread through like that, I can join the two together. And I'll make one more pass around it, going through the top of the last set of stitches. Trying to keep everything symmetrical. And back through, and I do split the fibers on this last one. So I go into the strand of yarn versus under it. So I'm into the strands of yarn. There we go. Now I'm going to pull my tail thread back through to the inside. And then this is where you're going to weave in your ends. And I try to follow the flow of the stitch. Now remember this knot where I joined color B and color A, and see it was really loosely done. So that way I can take it out. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to remove the knot that I created. And again, I want to take this side and join it on this side. And the same thing with the blue, I want to connect it to the opposite side. So here is the cowl to the matching hat and cowl set for wings. I hope that you have enjoyed this tutorial, and this top part is optional. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. Just cast off in pattern. If you want to do a 1x1 ribbing or a 2x2 ribbing, that's cool too. This is just what I designed for the original pattern for wings. And for this tutorial, I went off of my original design. So that is entirely up to you how you want to work it and how big or how tall you want to work it. If you want to keep going, you're more than welcome to do so. But I do want to thank you for watching, and be blessed, be a blessing, and until next time, everyone, bye for now.